Malik Thompson was just a rideshare driver in Seattle, working late nights to support his sister's education. One ride changed everything. A white couple began arguing in the back seat, and the husband suddenly turned his anger on Malik, striking him without cause. Blood on his lip, silence in the car, an old injustice trying to repeat itself. But a patrol officer chose fairness over bias, and a courtroom reminded the city that justice has no color. Respect is a choice. Equality is not optional. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if you believe some heroes are willing to look guilty to save the innocent, this story is for you. Seattle, Washington. A fine mist drifted across the streets like a silver veil, soft rain tapping gently against storefront windows and traffic lights casting blurred halos onto wet asphalt. The Space Needle stood faint in the distance, half hidden in low clouds. It was the kind of night that made the city feel quieter than it really was, calm on the surface, restless underneath. Malik Thompson adjusted his rearview mirror and exhaled slowly. Malik was 34 years old, tall with a lean athletic build shaped not by the gym but by long hours on his feet and longer years learning discipline. His skin was a deep brown, smooth except for a faint scar near his chin from a childhood accident. He kept his hair cut short and close to his scalp, neat and practical. His dark brown eyes carried a steady, observant calm, the kind of eyes that noticed everything but rarely reacted. He dressed simply. Dark jeans, clean sneakers, and a gray zip-up jacket layered over a navy shirt. Nothing flashy. Nothing that called attention. He had learned early that attention could be dangerous. Malik had grown up in Tacoma, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs and still found time to teach him one thing above all. Dignity is not something anyone can take unless you give it away. His father had left when he was 8, a quiet absence that hardened Malik into someone who rarely depended on others. He had once dreamed of becoming a high school history teacher, but life had turned practical. Bills came first. Dreams waited. Now he drove for a rideshare company at night and worked part-time delivering medical supplies during the day. Every extra shift, every late ride had a purpose. His younger sister, Aisha Thompson, was in her 2nd year of nursing school at the University of Washington. Aisha was 21, medium height with warm brown skin like Malik's, though her features were softer, her smile brighter. She wore her hair in long, natural curls that framed her round face, and her wide, hazel-brown eyes reflected a hopeful determination that Malik admired. She had always been the optimistic one, believing in systems, believing in people. She studied late, volunteered at clinics, and talked about becoming a pediatric nurse. When she laughed, it felt like sunlight. Malik often told her, "Education is armor, and the law, when it works, is a shield." He said it because he wanted to believe it. His phone chimed softly. New ride request. Pickup, Capitol Hill. Destination, Bellevue Residential District. 4 passengers. Malik tapped, accept. 15 minutes later, he pulled up outside a large, craftsman-style home glowing with warm yellow porch lights. The front yard still carried signs of a gathering. Paper plates stacked near the door, faint music drifting from inside, muffled laughter. The first to step out was Daniel Whitman. Daniel was 38, tall and broad-shouldered, with a solid build that hinted at years of college athletics long abandoned. His skin was pale, slightly flushed from alcohol and cold air. His dark blonde hair was cut short but already disheveled. He wore a navy overcoat over a white button-down shirt that strained slightly at the collar. His jaw was square, clean-shaven but tense. His blue-gray eyes carried impatience, the kind that flared quickly when contradicted. Daniel worked as a regional sales manager for a tech distribution company. He had built his personality around achievement. Targets met, promotions earned, expectations exceeded. Recently, however, the company had announced restructuring. His position felt uncertain. The pressure clung to him like humidity. Behind him came Claire Whitman. Claire was 36, tall and slender, with fair skin dusted in faint freckles across her cheeks. Her auburn hair was pulled into a loose, low bun, slightly undone by the damp air. She wore a beige trench coat over a soft green dress, practical heels clicking lightly against the pavement. Her hazel eyes were expressive, tired but thoughtful. Unlike Daniel's rigid posture, Claire's movements were controlled, careful. Claire had once been a high school art teacher before stepping back to focus on raising their children. She was empathetic by nature, often smoothing over Daniel's sharper edges in social situations. But tonight, something in her expression was strained, like a thread pulled too tight. 2 children followed them. Ethan Whitman, 10 years old, slim and slightly tall for his age, with sandy blonde hair that fell into his eyes. He wore a small navy blazer over a t-shirt, sneakers untied. His green eyes were observant and quieter than most boys his age. He absorbed attention the way paper absorbs water. Next was Lily Whitman, 7 years old, petite with light freckles like her mother's and long straight blonde hair tucked behind her ears. She clutched a small stuffed rabbit under her arm. Her blue eyes were wide and confused, sensing the adult tension without understanding it. Malik stepped out briefly, polite and professional. "Good evening, Malik. I'll get you home safely." Daniel nodded curtly and opened the rear passenger door. The children slid in first. Claire followed. Daniel sat behind Malik. The rain thickened slightly as they pulled away. For the first few minutes, there was silence except for the steady hum of tires on wet pavement. The city lights streaked past in blurred reflections. Malik kept his hands at 10 and 2, posture straight. Then it began. "You didn't have to say that in front of my brother," Daniel muttered. Claire's voice was low but firm. "I didn't say anything untrue. You embarrassed me. I asked about the mortgage, Daniel. That's not embarrassment, that's reality." The tension in the back seat grew like rising steam. Malik focused on the road. Daniel's tone sharpened. "You always do this. You pick the worst time. And you always avoid the conversation," Claire replied. Ethan stared down at his hands. Lily squeezed her rabbit tighter. Malik had driven enough couples to recognize the pattern. Suppressed argument, alcohol, release. The argument escalated, voices rising, words sharper, references to credit card balances, late payments, career uncertainty, unspoken resentment. Daniel leaned forward suddenly, his breath hot with frustration. "Just drive!" he snapped. Malik nodded slightly. "Yes, sir." The word "sir" felt heavy. They stopped at a red light near an intersection where rain pooled at the curb. Neon from a convenience store flickered against the windshield. Claire spoke again, softer but unwavering. "We can't keep pretending everything's fine." That was when something shifted. Daniel's breathing changed, shorter, sharper. He ran a hand through his hair violently. "I said, drop it." "I won't." The light remained red. Without warning, Daniel's anger redirected, like a storm looking for a new target. "You hear that?" he said suddenly, voice louder. "Can't even have peace in my own house." Malik said nothing. Daniel leaned forward again. "You people must hear this all the time, huh? Just driving around, listening." Claire's voice cracked. "Daniel, stop." Malik kept his eyes forward. "I'm just focused on the road, sir." The word "sir" again. Calm. Neutral. Daniel's pride twisted that calm into insult. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, sir." The red light stretched endlessly, and then it happened. Daniel's fist came forward fast and clumsy, fueled by anger more than precision. It struck Malik's cheek and mouth from behind. The sound was dull, shocking. Malik's head jerked slightly forward. A metallic taste filled his mouth instantly. Warm blood touched his lower lip. Claire screamed. "Daniel!" Ethan froze. Lily began to cry softly. The light turned green. Malik's hands tightened on the wheel, but he did not swerve. He did not shout. He did not retaliate. He pulled the car safely to the side of the road instead, hazard lights blinking in the rain. Daniel's breathing was heavy now, like someone who had crossed a line and knew it. Claire grabbed his arm. "What is wrong with you?" Malik touched his lip gently. Blood smeared across his fingers. He turned slightly, voice steady despite the sting. "I'm ending the ride here." His cheek throbbed. His door panel showed a faint scuff from Daniel's shoe when he had lurched forward. The rain continued falling, soft, indifferent. For a moment, no one moved. The city seemed to hold its breath. Malik opened his door, stepped out into the drizzle, and inhaled the cold air. He did not yet know that this quiet, rain-soaked intersection would change everything. But for now, it was just a late-night ride gone wrong, and the storm had only begun. Rain continued to fall in a thin, steady curtain as Malik stood beside his car, hazard lights blinking amber against the wet pavement. Blood had slowed to a thin line at the corner of his mouth. He pressed a folded napkin from his glove compartment against it, breathing evenly, steadying himself not just physically but mentally. Behind him, the city traffic flowed around the stopped vehicle in cautious arcs. Claire stepped out first. Her heels splashed lightly against the curb as she moved quickly toward Daniel, who had just exited the rear passenger side. Her face had lost its earlier restraint. Now it was pale, shaken. The children remained inside, Ethan staring forward, Lily's quiet crying fading into soft hiccups. "Daniel," Claire said sharply, her voice low but urgent. "There's a camera in the car." Daniel froze. The words seemed to slice through the fog of anger that had clouded him moments earlier. His broad shoulders stiffened. He turned slowly toward Malik's windshield where a small black dash camera sat mounted near the rearview mirror. "What?" he muttered. "There's a camera," Claire repeated. "It records." Daniel's expression shifted from rage to something colder. Panic edged with calculation. He stepped toward Malik, his jaw tightening again, though now less explosive and more desperate. Malik remained by the driver's side door. He was still taller than Daniel by an inch or two, but he carried himself without threat. His voice was calm. "It's standard. For safety." Daniel ran a hand over his face. "Delete it," he said abruptly. Malik blinked once. "I'm not going to do that." Daniel took another step closer. His coat hung open now, rain dotting the fabric. "Look, man, I lost my temper. It was nothing. I'll pay for the damage. Just delete it." Claire placed a hand on Daniel's arm, gripping firmly. "Stop." Malik's dark eyes remained steady. "I don't want trouble," he said quietly. "I just want to go home." The truth of that statement hung in the air. He had no desire to escalate anything. He wanted the night to end. He wanted to wash the blood from his mouth and send Aisha a message reminding her to sleep before her early class. Daniel glanced back at the children inside the car. Ethan's eyes met his father's briefly before dropping again. That look, disappointment mixed with fear, cut deeper than the rain. Daniel's voice lowered but remained tense. "Delete it, please." Malik shook his head slightly. "I can't." The standoff might have stretched further if not for the sudden wash of blue and red light reflecting off the wet street. A patrol car slowed, then pulled up behind Malik's vehicle. Officer Thomas Reed stepped out first. Reed was in his early 40s, medium height with a stocky build, pale skin weathered by years on patrol. His sandy hair was cut short under his cap, and faint lines framed his eyes. He carried himself with casual authority, one hand resting near his belt as he approached. Reed had spent nearly 15 years on the force. He believed in order, in keeping things simple. Complexity irritated him. He glanced at the stopped car, then at the small group standing beside it. "Evening," he said. "You can't park here." Daniel straightened immediately, slipping into a familiar professional tone. "Officer, it's just a misunderstanding. We're fine." Reed's gaze flicked briefly to Malik's lip, but did not linger. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," Daniel answered quickly. Malik opened his mouth slightly, then closed it. Reed shrugged lightly. "All right then. Let's keep traffic moving." A second officer stepped out of the patrol car. Officer Elena Ramirez moved differently, more deliberate. She was in her early 30s, medium height with a straight, balanced posture. Her olive-toned skin glistened slightly under the rain. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight bun at the base of her neck. Sharp brown eyes took in details quickly. The blood on Malik's lip, the children inside the car, Claire's trembling hand still on Daniel's sleeve. Ramirez did not speak immediately. She walked closer, boots steady against the pavement. "Sir," she said, addressing Malik, "are you injured?" Malik hesitated. He could feel Daniel's stare on him. "It's nothing," Daniel interjected. Ramirez ignored him. Malik met her gaze. Something about her expression was different. Not accusatory, not dismissive. Attentive. "I was hit," Malik said quietly. The rain seemed louder in the pause that followed. Reed exhaled through his nose. "You two get into a scuffle?" "It was an accident," Daniel said quickly. "Just stress. We were arguing." Ramirez's eyes narrowed slightly. "He hit you." Malik nodded once. Reed shifted his weight. "Look, if nobody wants to press charges, we don't need to make this complicated." Ramirez turned toward him. "He's bleeding." Reed shrugged again. "It's a split lip." Ramirez stepped closer to Malik, examining the swelling along his cheek. "Do you need medical attention?" "I'm fine," Malik replied. His voice remained controlled, but there was a tightness now. Not fear, not anger, fatigue. Ramirez looked back at Daniel. "Sir, did you strike him?" Daniel's jaw clenched. "Yes, but I regret it." Claire spoke softly. "He lost control." Ramirez straightened. "That's not an explanation." Reed gave a small, impatient sigh. "Elena, it's a domestic spillover. Happens all the time." Ramirez's expression hardened slightly at the phrase. She had grown up in Yakima, the daughter of Mexican immigrants. Her father had worked construction, hands permanently roughened by labor. When she was 12, she watched him pulled over for a minor traffic stop. The officer had treated him with suspicion first, respect second. She never forgot the way her father kept his eyes lowered, voice polite, though he had done nothing wrong. That memory had shaped her decision to join the force. She believed authority should protect dignity, not erode it. She turned back to Malik. "Sir, I need you to be honest. Do you feel safe?" The question surprised him. Malik considered it. The rain ran down his jacket sleeve. Daniel stood only a few feet away. The children were still inside the car, small silhouettes against the dim interior light. "I don't want problems," Malik said. "That's not what I asked," Ramirez replied gently. He looked at her again. "I don't feel safe right now." The words settled firmly. Reed shifted again, less comfortable now. "All right, we'll sort it out at the station." Daniel's face flushed. "This is unnecessary." Ramirez's tone remained calm. "Sir, you admitted to striking him. That makes it necessary." Claire closed her eyes briefly as if accepting something inevitable. Ramirez instructed everyone to remain where they were while she radioed in the situation. The children were asked to step out carefully. Ethan kept his head down. Lily clutched her rabbit tighter. Malik leaned lightly against his car, feeling the weight of the moment. He had not planned for this. He had not wanted it. But the camera inside his vehicle had captured everything, silent and impartial. Reed approached him once more, voice lower. You sure you want to do this?" Malik met his gaze. "I didn't start it." Reed nodded slowly, though his expression suggested lingering doubt about whether it was worth the paperwork. Ramirez returned. "We're taking statements downtown." Daniel's shoulders slumped slightly. Claire wrapped her coat tighter around herself. As the patrol car lights reflected off the rain-soaked street once more, Malik felt something unfamiliar rising beneath the fatigue. Not triumph, not fear. Something steadier. The camera inside his car had recorded the truth. And for the first time that night, the truth was not being ignored. The Seattle Police Department's East Precinct stood under fluorescent floodlights, its concrete exterior damp from the lingering rain. Inside, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paperwork. The atmosphere was controlled, procedural, nothing like the charged silence of the street they had left behind. Malik sat upright in a molded plastic chair in the intake area, a white gauze pad now taped lightly to the inside of his lower lip. A paramedic had briefly examined him in the lobby. An older woman named Linda Carver, late 50s, short gray hair cut close to her head, kind blue eyes framed by thin wire glasses. She had worked emergency response for over 30 years and carried the calm of someone who had seen chaos too often to panic. "It'll swell," she told him gently. "But you'll be fine." Her steady tone felt grounding. Across the room, Daniel Whitman sat rigidly on a bench, hands clasped together, elbows on his knees. Without the rain and adrenaline, he looked smaller somehow. His broad frame sagged slightly under the harsh lighting. His face had paled, and the sharp edge in his eyes had dulled into something closer to shame. He stared at the tile floor as if it might offer an escape route. Claire sat beside him, but not close enough to touch. Her posture remained straight, but her hands were folded tightly in her lap. The auburn bun at the back of her head had loosened further, strands falling around her face. She looked composed, yet distant. Her hazel eyes no longer scanned the room in anxiety. Instead, they rested on Daniel with a quiet evaluation she had perhaps avoided for years. Ethan and Lily sat across from their parents under the supervision of a civilian aide named Margaret Sloan. Margaret was in her early 40s, medium height with a gentle, rounded build and short, curly brown hair. Her voice was soft, practiced in calming children in uncomfortable situations. She offered them juice boxes and small packets of crackers. Ethan accepted politely, but did not eat. Lily held the juice with both hands, staring at the floor. Officer Reed leaned against a counter filling out preliminary paperwork, his pen moving with efficient indifference. Officer Ramirez stood near Malik, reviewing a digital tablet. After a few moments, Ramirez stepped closer to Malik. Up close, her features were sharp, but not harsh. There was resolve in her expression, but also empathy. "Mr. Thompson," she said quietly, "I need to ask you directly. Do you want to file a formal complaint?" Malik looked down at his hands. They were steady now. He had replayed the moment in his mind several times already. Not the punch itself, but the silence afterward. The children's faces, the rain. "I just want to work," he said finally. "That's it." Ramirez nodded once. "I understand. But what happened was assault." Daniel lifted his head at that word. "I lost my temper," Daniel said quickly, his voice carrying across the room. "I'm under a lot of stress. That's not an excuse, I know. I'm sorry." He looked at Malik directly now. "I shouldn't have done that." Malik met his gaze, but did not respond. Ramirez continued. "If you choose to press charges, we'll support you through the process. If you don't, that's your right too. But the decision should be yours, not influenced by pressure." Reed glanced up briefly, then back down at his forms. Daniel stood slowly, approaching a few steps before stopping himself. His shoulders, once squared with defensiveness, now drooped. "Look," he said, voice strained. "I've had a rough few months. My company's restructuring. I might lose my position. My father's medical bills are stacking up," I snapped. "That's on me." He swallowed. Please don't let one mistake ruin everything." Claire's eyes flickered at that, one mistake. Ramirez watched Malik carefully. "You have time," she said. "Think about what's best for you." Malik's mind drifted briefly to Aisha sitting in her small apartment near campus, textbooks spread across a narrow desk. He pictured the tuition balance he had checked earlier that week. If he pressed charges, court dates would mean missed work, missed income. Legal processes were slow and draining. He also remembered his mother's words. Dignity is not something anyone can take unless you give it away. But dignity did not pay bills. "I don't want to press charges," Malik said quietly. Ramirez studied him, searching his face for hesitation born of fear rather than choice. "Are you sure?" "Yes." Daniel exhaled sharply, relief almost visible. Reed closed his folder with a small snap. "All right then, we'll document it and release everyone." Ramirez's jaw tightened slightly, but she respected Malik's decision. "We'll still file an incident report," she added, "for the record." Daniel nodded repeatedly. "Of course, thank you." "Thank you." Claire did not thank anyone. She stood slowly and moved toward Malik. "Mr. Thompson," she said softly, "I'm sorry, truly." Her voice carried sincerity. There was no defensiveness left in her tone, only exhaustion and quiet regret. Malik gave a small nod. "I appreciate that." Behind her, Daniel remained standing but did not approach further. The distance between husband and wife was now physical as well as emotional. As paperwork concluded, Margaret gently guided Ethan and Lily back toward their parents. Ethan avoided eye contact with Daniel. Lily clung to Claire's coat. Ramirez stepped aside with Malik near the exit. "If you change your mind," she said, "contact me directly." She handed him a small card. Her name was printed cleanly in black letters. Officer Elena Ramirez. Malik took it. "Thank you." She paused a moment. "You deserved better tonight." He absorbed that sentence silently. Outside, the rain had slowed to a faint drizzle. The air felt colder now, sharper against his swollen lip. Daniel and Claire walked ahead with their children, quieter than before. Daniel placed a tentative hand on Ethan's shoulder. The boy did not react. Claire glanced back once at Malik, her expression thoughtful, not defensive, not angry, but contemplative. Malik walked toward his car alone. Inside, the dash camera remained mounted where it always had been, small, unobtrusive, objective. He sat behind the wheel but did not start the engine immediately. The station lights reflected faintly on the windshield. He had chosen peace over process, work over retribution, simplicity over complication. For tonight, that would have to be enough. The camera had recorded the truth. The police had documented it. Daniel had apologized, and Malik, weary but steady, had decided not to pursue the matter further. The night was not over, but the official part of it was. He started the engine and drove away. Malik slept only a few hours after leaving the precinct. By morning, the swelling on his cheek had deepened into a dull ache. He moved slowly through his small one-bedroom apartment in South Seattle, the space modest but clean. A narrow couch sat against one wall, a second-hand wooden table near the window. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the sky a muted gray. His phone vibrated repeatedly on the kitchen counter while he brewed coffee. At first, he ignored it. Notifications were constant in his line of work: ride updates, promotional emails, payment summaries. But the vibration did not stop. He picked up the phone. There were messages from fellow drivers in a local rideshare group chat. There were missed calls from an unfamiliar number. There were social media notifications he rarely checked. One message stood out. From RideSphere Safety Team. Malik frowned slightly and opened it. The message explained that as part of their routine internal safety review, the company had accessed the footage from his in-car dash camera, which automatically uploaded to the rideshare cloud when an incident was flagged in the system. The assault had triggered that flag. The email continued. The company intended to use a portion of the footage, faces of minors blurred, identifying information removed, for internal training on conflict de-escalation and driver safety. They thanked him for his professionalism and calm response under pressure. Malik exhaled slowly. He had agreed to standard data use terms when he signed up to drive. It wasn't unusual. He assumed it would remain internal. But an hour later, his phone vibrated again. This time, it was Aisha. Aisha Thompson was sitting at a small desk in her shared off-campus apartment near the university. Her roommate's textbooks were stacked high on the opposite side. Morning light filtered through thin curtains. Aisha's dark curls were pulled into a loose bun, and she wore oversized scrubs from a clinical practice earlier that week. Her expressive hazel-brown eyes were wide with concern as she waited for her brother to answer. When Malik picked up, her voice came quickly. "Malik, I just saw something online. Is that you?" He leaned back against the kitchen counter. "What did you see?" "There's a video. A driver in Seattle. A man hits him at a red light." Her voice trembled slightly. "It's you, isn't it?" Malik paused. "Yeah." Aisha inhaled sharply. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he said. "It looks worse than it is." Aisha had always been emotionally transparent. When she was 10, she had once cried for hours after witnessing a classmate bullied. It was part of what had drawn her toward nursing, a need to mend what hurt. "You didn't fight back," she said softly. "No." "I'm proud of you," she whispered. Malik didn't know how to respond to that. Meanwhile, across the city, the rideshare internal training video had already begun circulating beyond its intended audience. rideshare's regional operations manager, Karen Whitfield, had approved the training release. Karen was in her mid-40s, tall, with a lean build and sharp posture that reflected years in corporate leadership. Her straight blonde hair was cut to shoulder length, always immaculate. She had built her career on risk mitigation and brand protection. She believed strongly in documentation and procedure. In her mind, transparency prevented lawsuits. What she had not anticipated was that one of the training coordinators, an eager young employee named Tyler Nguyen, 26, tech-savvy and ambitious, would share a short clip in a professional driver forum to highlight best practices. Tyler, slim with neatly styled black hair and quick-moving hands, had grown up immersed in online communities. To him, sharing educational content felt harmless, even helpful. Within hours, the clip spread beyond the forum. First, it appeared on a rideshare discussion page. Then someone reposted it to a broader social media platform. The caption read, "Driver assaulted, stays calm. This is what professionalism looks like." By mid-afternoon, thousands of views had accumulated. Comments flooded in. Some praised Malik's composure. Others debated why he hadn't defended himself. A few comments veered into racial undertones, questioning, provoking, reflecting the same old divisions society struggled to outgrow. Malik watched the numbers climb from his couch, a tightness forming in his chest that had nothing to do with the bruise. He had not chosen to become visible. At his workplace, Daniel Whitman faced a different kind of visibility. He sat in a glass-walled conference room at the regional office of his tech distribution company in Bellevue. The room was sterile, modern, with polished floors and sleek black chairs. Across from him sat his supervisor, Mark Feldman. Mark was 52, medium height with thinning gray hair and a serious, methodical demeanor. He wore wire-rimmed glasses and a charcoal suit that never seemed to wrinkle. Mark valued reputation above almost everything else. Years earlier, a public scandal involving another employee had nearly cost him a promotion. He had not forgotten. Mark folded his hands. "Daniel, the video is circulating widely." Daniel stared at the tabletop. The confidence that once defined him seemed fractured. "It was a mistake." Mark nodded slowly. "It was more than that. It reflects on the company. Daniel's jaw tightened. I already apologized. That's not the issue, Mark replied evenly. We're placing you on temporary suspension pending review. Daniel felt the weight of that word, suspension, like a door closing quietly behind him. At home that evening, Claire sat at the kitchen island, laptop open, watching the same clip. The video did not show her face clearly, it did not show the children, but it showed Daniel's movement. The strike, Malik's stillness. Claire's posture was rigid, but her thoughts were fluid and shifting. She had spent years smoothing Daniel's temper in private. She had excused his sharp tone as stress, his impatience as ambition. Seeing it replayed publicly stripped away her justifications. Ethan stood in the doorway silently. He had found the video too. Children his age navigated the internet easily. Is that Dad? He asked. Claire closed the laptop slowly. Yes. Ethan's voice was small. Why did he do that? Claire did not answer immediately. Meanwhile, in Malik's apartment, his phone continued to buzz. A local news blog had embedded the clip. An opinion writer had framed it as an example of restraint under pressure. A community advocacy page had highlighted the incident as part of a broader conversation about respect and bias. Malik felt exposed. He called Aisha again. It's getting bigger, he said. Aisha's tone shifted from worry to steadiness. Then let it be a lesson, she said. Not just about what happened, about how you handled it. Malik leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I didn't do anything. You didn't escalate, she replied. Sometimes that's everything. By nightfall, the view count had climbed into the tens of thousands. Rideshare released a formal statement emphasizing driver safety, zero tolerance for violence, and support for affected employees. Karen Whitfield read the statement twice before approving it for publication, her expression controlled but slightly strained. She had not anticipated this scale of attention. In group chats, drivers debated policy changes. Should there be panic buttons more accessible? Should rides automatically end if aggression was detected? Conversations expanded beyond Malik. Daniel sat alone in his dim living room that night, scrolling through comments. Each replay of his raised fist felt heavier than the last. His pride, once a shield, now felt like a mirror reflecting his worst moment. Malik turned off his phone. He stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker against the dark. He had wanted quiet resolution. Instead, the camera, silent and objective, had carried his story into thousands of homes. He had not pressed charges. He had not sought attention. But the video knew the truth. And now, so did everyone else. The rain had cleared from Seattle, but the sky remained a pale gray sheet stretched over the city. News vans occasionally parked outside the courthouse downtown, their antennas pointed toward the sky like silent observers. The story that had begun at a red light was no longer just a viral clip. It had become a civic conversation. Judge Robert Henderson first saw the video late one evening in his study. Henderson was 62 years old, tall with a broad frame that age had softened but not weakened. His silver hair was combed neatly back, and his blue-gray eyes held a sharp intelligence shaped by 4 decades in the legal system. He had been raised in Spokane by a father who worked as a public defender and a mother who taught civics at a public high school. Fairness, to him, was not a slogan. It was structure. His study walls were lined with law books and framed photographs from community events. Henderson was preparing for a public address he planned to give about restoring public trust in the judicial system. Seattle had faced criticism in recent years, claims of inconsistency, allegations of bias, public skepticism fueled by social media. He knew perception mattered. When the video appeared on his tablet screen, he watched it twice. He did not see just a man being struck. He saw hesitation afterward. He saw the officer's divided response. He saw the restraint of the driver. Henderson leaned back slowly in his leather chair. Transparency, he murmured to himself. The next morning, he requested a briefing from the city prosecutor's office regarding the incident. Assistant City Prosecutor Linda Park arrived at his chambers that afternoon. Park was in her early 40s, Korean-American, petite with sharp features and observant dark eyes. Her black hair was cut in a precise chin-length bob. She carried herself with composed professionalism, rarely raising her voice, preferring logic over theatrics. She had built her career on meticulous preparation and believed strongly that public accountability preserved institutional credibility. The driver declined to press charges, Park explained, placing a slim file folder on the judge's desk. The police documented the incident. It was closed. Henderson tapped the folder lightly. The incident may have been closed procedurally. Publicly, it is not. Park nodded. There's significant attention. Which means, Henderson said calmly, the court has an opportunity to clarify the standard. He was careful not to frame it as spectacle. In his mind, this was about precedent and message. If a recorded assault, publicly acknowledged, resulted in no judicial review, what signal did that send? Henderson requested that the prosecutor review whether the case met criteria for reopening in the interest of public accountability. Within days, Daniel Whitman received a formal summons. Daniel sat at his kitchen table when the envelope arrived. The house was quiet. Claire stood across from him as he read the document, his hands trembling slightly. He had not slept well since the suspension from work. Dark circles had formed beneath his eyes. The arrogance that once defined him had thinned into anxiety. "They're reopening it," he said quietly. Claire inhaled slowly. She had changed in subtle ways over the past week. She moved with more clarity, less automatic defense of her husband. The shock of seeing the video repeatedly online had unsettled her deeply. "I won't lie," she said simply. Daniel looked up. "Claire, I won't lie for you," she repeated, not unkindly but firmly. Across town, Malik received his own notice. He opened the envelope at his kitchen counter, reading the formal language carefully. He was being called to appear as the victim in a reopened misdemeanor assault hearing. He sat down, slowly. The idea of standing in a courtroom unsettled him more than the punch itself had. He had chosen not to pursue charges. Now the system had chosen differently. His phone buzzed moments later. It was Officer Ramirez. "Mr. Thompson," she said when he answered, her tone steady. "You've likely received the notice?" "I did." "There will be a hearing," she explained. "I've been listed as a witness." Malik absorbed that quietly. "I didn't want this." "I know," Ramirez replied. "But sometimes cases move beyond individual preference." Her voice carried neither pressure nor apology, just realism. Ramirez herself had received the notification earlier that morning. She had read it standing beside her patrol vehicle. She understood the weight of public scrutiny, yet part of her believed this was necessary. Documentation mattered. Patterns mattered. Officer Reed had also received notice. Reed sat in the break room at the precinct, staring at the memo. His posture was less relaxed than usual. He replayed the moment on the street, the way he had almost dismissed it, the way Ramirez had insisted. Reed had always considered himself fair, but fair, he realized now, could not be casual. It required attention. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. For the first time, he wondered how often he had chosen efficiency over thoroughness. Meanwhile, Claire scheduled a consultation with a marriage counselor. Dr. Elaine Carter, 50 years old, medium height with soft brown skin and calm, steady eyes, had practiced family therapy for over 20 years. Her office walls were lined with muted paintings and shelves of psychology books. She listened more than she spoke, her voice measured and thoughtful. Claire sat across from her, hands clasped. "I've protected his temper for years," Claire admitted quietly. "I told myself it was stress, ambition. But our children saw that." Dr. Carter nodded gently. Sometimes exposure reveals what routine hides. Claire's gaze sharpened slightly. I won't protect it anymore. Back in his apartment, Malik called Aisha. They reopened it, he told her. There was a pause on the line. Then Aisha spoke softly. Are you scared? Yes. Are you wrong? No. Then let the truth stand, she said. Malik looked at the card Ramirez had given him. He had kept it in his wallet. Across the city, Judge Henderson finalized the hearing schedule. He understood that some would accuse him of seeking publicity. He also understood that public confidence in justice required visible action when facts were clear. The courtroom date was set. Daniel Whitman would appear as the defendant. Malik Thompson would appear as the victim. Officer Elena Ramirez would testify as a responding officer. Officer Reed would also provide statement documentation. Claire would be called if necessary. The system had moved from quiet documentation to formal review. Malik folded the summons carefully and placed it on the table. The room felt smaller for a moment. He had wanted to move on. Instead, the city had decided the matter deserved light. And now he would stand in it. The King County courtroom felt larger than Malik expected. Sunlight filtered through tall rectangular windows, casting pale beams across polished wooden benches. The American flag stood behind the judge's bench, still and formal. The air carried a quiet gravity, the kind that demanded honesty without raising its voice. Malik sat at the plaintiff's table, hands resting lightly on the surface in front of him. He wore a charcoal suit he had borrowed from his friend Marcus Reed, a fellow driver and former college athlete with a broad build and easy laugh. Marcus had insisted. "If you're standing in court," he'd said, adjusting the jacket on Malik's shoulders, "stand like you belong there." Malik's suit fit well enough. His posture was straight, his dark eyes steady, but inside him, something old stirred, an inherited caution. He had grown up watching news stories where people who looked like him learned to avoid attention, avoid conflict, avoid systems that seemed distant or indifferent. Even now, seated in a courtroom meant to protect rights, a small voice whispered, "Stay quiet. Don't make trouble." Across the aisle sat Daniel Whitman. Daniel wore a navy suit that once symbolized confidence and upward mobility. Today, it looked heavier on him. His blonde hair was trimmed neatly, but fatigue lined his face. He had shaved carefully that morning, as if grooming could restore control. His shoulders remained broad, but they were no longer squared with pride. They carried humility now, perhaps for the first time in years. Behind him sat Claire and the children. Claire's posture was composed, her auburn hair pulled into a tidy bun. She wore a soft gray dress and held Lily's hand gently. Ethan sat on her other side, hands folded in his lap. Claire's expression was resolute. Not defensive, not ashamed, but grounded. She had spent weeks reflecting, attending sessions with Dr. Elaine Carter, confronting patterns she once excused. Today, she had chosen transparency over protection. Officer Elena Ramirez sat in uniform near the witness area, her dark hair secured tightly as always. Her gaze was observant but calm. Beside her sat Officer Reed, posture upright, hands resting formally on his knees. Reed's expression held quiet reflection. He had thought often about the night at the red light. He had come to understand that neutrality without attention could become negligence. At precisely 9 o'clock, Judge Robert Henderson entered. The courtroom rose. Henderson moved with deliberate steadiness. His silver hair was combed back, his judicial robe falling neatly from broad shoulders. His blue-gray eyes scanned the room, not with suspicion, but with intention. "Be seated," he said. The prosecutor, Assistant City Prosecutor Linda Park, stood first. Her voice was measured and precise as she summarized the facts. A recorded incident of physical assault, clear video evidence, prior admission by the defendant, public attention requiring judicial clarity. Daniel's defense attorney, Michael Grayson, a lean man in his late 40s with thinning brown hair and sharp cheekbones, rose next. Grayson's demeanor was calm and strategic. He acknowledged the assault, but emphasized remorse and lack of prior offenses. Malik was called to the stand. As he stood, his heartbeat thudded heavily against his ribs. He walked forward with measured steps, took the oath, and sat upright. Linda Park approached gently. "Mr. Thompson, can you describe what happened that night?" Malik's voice was steady, though quiet. He described the rain, the argument in the back seat, the sudden strike. He did not dramatize. He did not accuse. He stated facts. "And how did you respond?" Park asked. "I pulled over safely," he said. "I ended the ride." Park nodded. "Did you provoke the defendant in any way?" "No." As Malik spoke, something shifted within him. The system he had once regarded with wary distance was listening. Truly listening. Grayson approached for cross-examination but kept it brief. There was little to challenge. Officer Ramirez testified next. She described arriving at the scene, observing Malik's injury, and hearing Daniel's admission. Her tone was professional, her words precise. Officer Reed testified afterward. His voice carried a subtle change from his earlier confidence. "I initially assessed it as minor," he admitted, "but upon reflection I understand it required full documentation." Henderson listened carefully. Finally, Daniel was called. He stood slowly, walked to the witness stand, and took the oath. His voice, once quick to defend, now carried restraint. "I lost control," he said. "There's no excuse." He glanced briefly at Malik before continuing. "I was under stress, work, financial pressure, but none of that justifies what I did." The courtroom remained silent. "I apologize," Daniel said clearly, looking directly at Malik this time. "Not because I was caught, because I was wrong." Malik met his gaze. He saw not arrogance, but accountability. When testimony concluded, Judge Henderson folded his hands atop the bench. He looked first at Malik, then at Daniel, then briefly at the gallery where Claire sat with her children. "We want a city," Henderson began, his voice resonant but calm, "where fairness exists for everyone. No one chooses their skin color. No one chooses their origin. But each of us chooses how we act." The words settled into the room. "Mr. Whitman," he continued, "your actions were deliberate. Stress explains nothing. Responsibility explains everything." Daniel lowered his head slightly. "This court acknowledges your admission and lack of prior record. However, accountability must be visible." Henderson delivered his ruling. Daniel Whitman was ordered to complete a certified anger management program, perform 100 hours of community service, and provide financial restitution for medical costs and vehicle damage. The ruling was firm, but not punitive beyond proportion. "This sentence," Henderson concluded, "is not solely about punishment. It is about correction." A quiet breath moved through the courtroom. Claire squeezed Ethan's hand gently. She leaned down slightly, whispering so only her children could hear. "When we make mistakes, we fix them. That's what grown-ups do." Ethan nodded faintly. Lily leaned her head against her mother's arm. Ramirez allowed herself the smallest smile. Barely visible. Justice in its proper measure had been applied. Not excessive, not dismissive. Balanced. Malek remained seated for a moment after the gavel struck lightly. He felt something unfamiliar. Not triumph, not vindication. Relief, perhaps. A steady warmth beneath his ribs. For the first time, the idea that the system could stand beside him did not feel abstract. The old caution inside him did not disappear. It softened. Daniel approached slowly after proceedings concluded. There was no handshake, no dramatic gesture, only a quiet nod exchanged between two men who now understood the weight of one moment's choice. Outside the courthouse, the sky had cleared fully. Light reflected off the steps. Malik descended slowly, suit jacket shifting with each step. He paused at the bottom and looked back once. Not at the building, but at the idea it represented. Fairness had not ignored him. For the first time in a long while, that felt real. Seattle woke beneath a clear sky for the first time in weeks. The early sun stretched across Elliott Bay, casting gold over glass towers and quiet neighborhoods. The air felt different, lighter, almost expectant. Malik Thompson stood beside his car in the parking lot outside his apartment building, adjusting the rearview mirror as he prepared for another day of driving. The bruise on his cheek had faded to a faint shadow. The swelling was gone. What remained was something less visible but more enduring, an awareness that he no longer carried alone. He wore a fresh navy jacket, the collar crisp, posture straight. He moved with the same calm discipline as before, but there was a subtle confidence in the way he held himself now. Not pride, not defiance, just clarity. A week after the court ruling, Rideshare had invited him to their regional headquarters. The headquarters building was modern, sleek glass and steel reflecting the city skyline. Inside, a small gathering had been arranged in a modest conference room. Karen Whitfield stood at the front, composed as always, her blonde hair perfectly aligned at her shoulders. Yet today, her tone held warmth rather than corporate detachment. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "your professionalism under pressure represented our standards at their best." She presented him with a formal letter of recognition and a financial bonus designated for driver safety excellence. The room applauded, soft but sincere. Tyler Nguyen stood off to the side, hands clasped nervously. He had learned a lesson about digital responsibility from the video's unexpected reach. When he approached Malik afterward, he bowed his head slightly. "I'm sorry for how widely it spread," he said. "I didn't think it would." Malik nodded calmly. Maybe it needed to. Since the trial, messages from strangers had filled his inbox. Some were brief, "Stay strong." Others were longer, sharing stories of restraint and dignity. He read them quietly at night. He did not respond to all of them, but he absorbed their meaning. Across the city, Daniel Whitman sat in a modest classroom with 8 other men and women. The anger management program met twice a week in a community center near Green Lake. The instructor, Dr. Harold Simmons, was a tall, lean, African-American man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair and measured eyes. A former military psychologist, Simmons had spent years counseling veterans returning from conflict. He believed anger was rarely about a single moment. It was about accumulated silence. Daniel sat with hands folded, listening. The man who once measured success in quarterly numbers was now measuring his own impulses. During one session, Simmons asked, "What did your anger cost you?" Daniel hesitated before answering. "Respect," he said quietly. He completed the full program without missing a session. He performed his community service hours at a food distribution center in South Seattle, stacking crates, sorting canned goods. At first, he worked silently. Gradually, he began conversations with volunteers, many of whom came from backgrounds unlike his own. Exposure reshaped him. Months later, Daniel wrote a letter. He sat at his kitchen table, pen moving carefully across thick stationery. His handwriting was steadier than it had been in court. "Malik, you could have chosen to press charges immediately. You didn't. That decision gave me space to face myself instead of just defending myself. I am grateful for that. I am learning." Slowly, but sincerely. Daniel. Malik read the letter twice before folding it and placing it in a drawer. He did not respond in writing. Some acknowledgments required no reply. Daniel began speaking occasionally at local community forums organized by the Anger Management Center. His voice, once sharp and defensive, now carried humility. He spoke about accountability, about stress as explanation, but never excuse. He did not portray himself as reformed hero, only as someone who had been wrong and was choosing differently. Meanwhile, Aisha Thompson walked across a graduation stage under bright spring sunlight. The University of Washington campus buzzed with families and celebration. Aisha wore her nursing gown proudly, dark curls flowing beneath her cap. Her smile radiated the optimism she had carried since childhood. Malik sat in the crowd, suit jacket folded neatly across his lap. When Aisha's name was called, he stood and clapped louder than anyone around him. His chest felt full, not of vindication, but of fulfillment. After the ceremony, Aisha hugged him tightly. "You told me education was armor," she said. "You were right." Malik smiled softly. "And courage?" "That too," she replied. At the precinct, Officer Thomas Reed stood at the edge of a routine traffic stop. The driver, a young man with nervous hands gripping the wheel, met Reed's gaze cautiously. In the past, Reed might have rushed the interaction, minimizing engagement to keep the shift moving. Now he paused. He leaned slightly forward, voice steady but calm. "Everything okay tonight?" It was a small shift, tone, posture, attention, but Reed had come to understand that fairness required more than neutrality. It required presence. Officer Ramirez noticed the change over weeks. She said nothing, only nodded once when Reed handled a tense situation with patience instead of impatience. Claire Whitman organized something new. At Dr. Elaine Carter's suggestion, she contacted a local restorative dialogue group that facilitated structured community conversations. The meeting took place in a modest church hall with wooden floors and folding chairs arranged in a circle. Malek agreed to attend. He arrived in simple attire, dark jeans, clean button-down shirt, hands relaxed at his sides. Daniel and Claire entered together with Ethan and Lily. The children had grown quieter over the past months, but not withdrawn. They watched carefully. The facilitator, a middle-aged woman named Grace Holloway with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, guided the conversation. Grace believed in slow speech and attentive listening. Daniel spoke first, not defensively, not dramatically, just honestly. Malik listened. When it was his turn, he spoke about restraint, not weakness but strength, about how silence had once felt safer than truth. Claire squeezed Lily's hand gently and looked at Ethan. "This is how we fix things," she whispered. At the end of the session, there was no grand reconciliation, only a handshake. Daniel extended his hand carefully. Malik accepted it. Their grip was firm, not symbolic of friendship but of mutual recognition. Respect. The following morning, Malik began his shift before sunrise. The streets of Seattle glowed pale gold as the sun rose behind the mountains. Traffic was light. The city seemed quieter at that hour, unburdened by midday noise. Malik drove along the waterfront, the skyline reflecting softly against calm water. He rolled the window down slightly, cool air brushing against his face. Justice had not been loud. It had been measured, deliberate, imperfect but real. He thought of the courtroom, of Henderson's words, of Ramirez's steady gaze, of Reed's subtle change, of Aisha's graduation, of Daniel's letter. For years, silence had felt like survival. Now he understood something different. Silence was not the only option. He stopped briefly at a red light, the same color that had marked the beginning of everything. This time, there was no tension, no raised voice, only mourning. The light turned green. Malik smiled faintly and drove forward into the new day. This story reminds us that strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is the decision to stay calm when anger is thrown at you. Sometimes it is the courage to speak the truth, even when silence feels safer. In daily life, we meet pressure, stress, misunderstanding, and moments when our pride pushes us to react. But character is revealed not in comfort, it is revealed in conflict. Malik teaches us that dignity is power. Daniel teaches us that accountability can change a life. Claire teaches us that protecting truth is more important than protecting pride. Justice may move slowly, but it moves strongest when ordinary people choose honesty over ego. In our homes, workplaces, and communities, let us treat one another with respect regardless of color, background, or status. No one chooses where they are born, but everyone chooses how they act. If we want a better society, we must become better individuals. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs encouragement. Leave a comment and tell us what lesson stood out to you. Subscribe to the channel to continue supporting stories that inspire growth and fairness. May God bless you and your family with wisdom, patience, and courage. And if you believe that justice and mercy can walk together, type Amen in the comments and let your voice be heard.